before various courts and authorities. Uh, she also is a part of a collective known as the Buddhist Fraternity Council that aims to promote constitutional values through socially engaged Buddhism, carrying forward the legacy and vision of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar to reestablish Buddhism in India. Uh, and Mridula will talk about how Buddhism enables women's access to spiritual life in the current moment. Over to you, Mridula.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tejas. Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya to everyone. And one sec, I'll start my video. Hi. Yes, Jai Bhim, Namo Buddhaya to everyone. I've made like a small presentation, so I'd like to share my screen. So I'll just a minute.
Yeah, we gave you the access to share it. Is it possible?
Yeah, just a second.
Okay.
I'm trying. I have to like. I'll just rejoin. I think it's asking me to rejoin. Well, oh wait, open system. Yeah. Okay, never mind. I think
we can give you the access to share, and it will be very interactive.
yeah.
He is a co-host. She should be able to join it.
Okay. Can you please take a look at it one more time?
Yes, just a second. I'll just try once again. Am I visible?
Yes.
Perfect. So yeah. So that's my presentation today, like transcending constraints of gender, and how Buddhism enables one to do that. So first of all, like before starting, I'd like to like clarify what I mean by the term spirituality and religion for the purpose of this particular session. So spirituality is basically any practice that helps people to orient ourselves and get a sense of direction in life, or ground ourselves in a particular purpose, or like find an anchor, nourish our spirits and minds, to like sort of renew ourselves, our minds regularly, and also transforming and getting through life experiences and changes that are constant in life without like much turbulence. There are ups and downs, so it's something that enables you to move through that without like hurting yourself or others. So these are the four important purposes of spiritual practices, and yeah, this is also for the self and the community. It's not just for the self. And religion being the organized and institutionalized support system that sort of facilitates these practices sort of like in a community, and also to perpetuate and like propagate these practices so that it's like more community oriented. And yeah, so this is like the first thing that I'd like to say. And also, as Dr. Ambedkar himself says, the cultivation of mind is like the highest purpose of human existence. That is also like is something I consider a spiritual practice. So that being said, let's move on to the term sentience. So sentience being the capacity to feel sensations, having an affective consciousness and subjective states, basically having a mind of your own, having some agency over that mind, and yeah, having a sense of yourself. That's what sentience is. And women's sentience has always been historically neglected by like mainstream religions, like all religions, right? And we are basically condemned to secondary supporting roles in a man's heroic spiritual journey. And this can be like evidenced from various paras from Bible or even the Bhagavad Gita. One can see these scriptures sort of supporting this, or like sort of projecting this role onto women, like in almost all religions, not all, at least like Bhagavad Gita and Bible. I don't know about the others, but I'm sure like they'll know better, people who practice those religions. But these two religions I've read the scriptures to know for sure. So then there is also this deliberate obscuration of like our own ability to have a sense of ourselves. We're constantly distracted. We're constantly like sort of manipulated to like center ourselves around other people, as you know. Yeah. So, and also sort of like conditioned to become disembodied through like active, overt, and covert forms of violence, mental, physical, and structural, right? So we basically, this is our state of being by default, being women. That maybe when we are children it's different, but when we, as we grow up, this sort of this kind of violence eventually disembodies us from and disconnects us from ourselves, from our bodies. So, and this disconnection between the mind and body sort of makes us ignorant of what we're like, makes us unable to like sort of tell what's going on with us, or to have like a sense of discernment about what's going on outside, and like having a sense of agency, right? And this is how like agency is robbed away from us. And because that sense of agency is robbed away, like where minds and bodies are sort of broken apart, we are like more susceptible to like needing external direction, or like sort of being enslaved to like authority figures, or like people who men in us in most contexts. So this is what the Buddha has called ignorance, ultimately ignorance of what's going on at a sensory level within ourselves, right? So one second. Yeah. So then there are like, one sec. Yeah. So then there are limits of feminism. And one of the major limit is that it doesn't address this aspect of like, you know, the spiritual void that is left with all these forms of violence that we go through. Because feminism primarily emphasizes on the social, political, and economic equality, but it kind of doesn't address this part very head on. It probably is because it's like it's different. It's considered very different for each person, so it doesn't really go into it. And because it doesn't go into it, there is a lack of cultural resources that support us in our existential crises, right? Like when we go through things that men go through, like illness, aging, death, abandonment, like there's very little for us, culturally speaking, for us to sort of, and that is specifically catered to our needs of, be it orientation, grounding, transformation, or like nurturing, right? Like there's very little that exists. And that's also because like we don't have much of an agency in controlling our spiritual life itself. Like we're too focused again on the social, political, and economic aspects, and we sort of, this is a neglected area. So, and also like when we try to sort of have some access, it's those practices are very marginalized, all right, and they're called names like witchcraft and occultism and things like that. And probably because of ignorance, because of like a proper facilitation of our spiritual lives, we kind of maybe even misguided, and we might be prone to more superstitions, right? Women are also, we tend to be more following, like we tend to be followers more than leaders in any kind of religious organization. Like mostly we are either nuns or like I mean, I was talking to a Bhante recently, and she was telling about how there's very little like material support that's given to like the Bhikkhuni Sangha, and how all of the money, all of the support goes to the male, the Bhikkhu Sangha, right? So this is like a discrimination that also exists in that, and they don't trust women in positions of spiritual authority or like religious authority. And that means that interpretations of scriptures and religious notions tends to be very singularly masculine, right? For one example is there's this feminist theologist called Grace Jackson, and she talks about how most religions are like particularly focused on mortality and immortality, but very little kind of talks about or like emphasizes upon natality or birth. And that is again because like women are closer to birth than like we are like more, because we are like we have the power to give, not power, but we have the ability to like capacity to give birth. We are more closer to that than like, so we tend to think our like our spirituality or thinking or perspective starts around natality. So that's again like something which is not as explored as like death, or like that comes from the male point of view. So then how is Buddhism different from like the other mainstream religions or spiritual practices? So if we see the historic Buddha, he was himself like, even though his religion, like he acknowledged that his doctrine or his wisdom did not really see gender, like gender was not at all an important marker for it. He was very hesitant to like start to include women into his sangha in the beginning because of practical restraints and inhibitions, right? And this is also spoken about in Dr. B.R. Ambedkar's The Buddha and His Dhamma, how like the formation of the first Bhikkhuni Sangha headed by Mahaprajapati Gautami started because one woman like mobilized some 500 women and came to the Buddha and said like asked him like 3 to 4 times before he could like admit them or like support the formation of a Bhikkhuni Sangha. And that was mostly because of practical realities and like constraints, where like how would women like even though he was himself enlightened, the bhikkhus that were in his sangha, he couldn't attest, like he couldn't like guarantee that they were all going to be safe for women. So one or two women or few women joining like a largely male dominated bhikkhu sangha was something that the Buddha did not support. But on the request of Bhikkhu Ananda, who kind of insisted that women could, or like he kind of questioned the Buddha, like, are you saying that gender is like a limit, or like are you like basically saying that, are you like saying women cannot be cannot attain enlightenment or liberation? It was then that the Buddha decided, fine, if there are 500 women like coming together, then safety wouldn't be that much of an issue. So once he was sure of that, he permitted the formation of the first Bhikkhuni Sangha. And like, of course, the spiritual experiences of this, the elderly women, elder nuns of the Bhikkhuni Sangha, it's recorded in the Therigathas, which is like a collection of short poetry. And Tanisara Bhikkhu regards them as like the earliest text depicting women's spiritual experiences. So that also comes from the Dhamma. So we definitely are pioneers in like gender equity in our religion. So that's there. So, and also the Sangha was not like, like Christianity also has some level of like, it tends to seem inclusive, but if we see, there's also this dichotomy of good woman, bad woman that's like rampant within the Bible, right? But when you read the Buddha and his Dhamma by Dr. Ambedkar, we can see how the Buddha was inclusive of women from all walks of life, right? They be they high born, low born, they could come from any kind of traumatic background, or like any kind of work that they did before wouldn't matter, or wouldn't like sort of be a definitive judgment on them, right? So that was also something that was to be appreciated about Buddhism, where it wasn't judgmental about women's character like before they joined the Sangha, and also sort of like included women from all walks of life. So then how does Buddhism serve feminism, right? So gender is a social construct. This is something all feminists keep talking about, but the root of this idea itself can be found in Buddha's Dhamma, where he says all these things are conditioned. They're not necessarily an inherent truth. They're conditioned, and they can be unconditioned or changed. They're variable. So that idea itself it's somewhere rooted in Buddha's notions of existence precedes essence over essence preceding existence. There are religions that sort of go with the doctrine of essence preceding existence, which means the existence of every being is preceded by an essence, which means they're coming with a predestined purpose, right? But Buddhism is the opposite of that. It says that there's no such thing. There's existence first, and the purpose can be created and molded in course of the said existence. So that way, like gender being a predetermined norm, or a rule or a law, is like not really supported in Buddhism. So and the next thing is of course uh, how Buddhism is all about experiential wisdom over received wisdom. It kind of enables women to not be dependent on external authority figures again, for like their own to realize that wisdom. So that also makes it more equal, right? That's where it says like if every sentient being can, like, you learn the rules and then you practice them and then you realize it then yourself. You're not consistently dependent on other people to sort of like make you feel good or give you an experience that is like, that's what cults do these days. So that's there. And it also centers the body. So it's one of the few religions that doesn't reject the body as disgusting. So that, because the most religions that consider women impure because of their menstruation cycle, or because like whatever, they see it as an object of lust, um, that isn't really a thing in Buddha's Dhamma if you see it originally. Like if you go by the first principles, even though in practice sometimes Buddhism also tends to be like rigid and strict in terms of women's bodies, but when you see the doctrine itself, it does not have that inherent disgust, or it doesn't treat the human body as a object that needs to be avoided or like removed from like religion. So that is an important aspect as well. Like even today, like when you go to these meditation retreats, you could be pregnant, you could be like on your menstruation, that is never a bar for you to like engage in like or to practice the meditation. So that's never like a thing that matters at all. So that's again like something that equalizes women and like gives them that space, right? Then there is the ideas of impermanence and like anatha, which sort of it's liberative, and it's these ideas can be used by feminism to sort of like undo a lot of injustice in the world and like remove themselves, like sort of redefine itself to like sort of uh, challenge definitions that are imposed by patriarchy, and also not take patriarchy as for granted, like it need not be there, it need not be a natural way of life. So that's again, these ideas are very liberating in and of itself. It can like, which can like support all kinds of political movements for liberation, right? And then there is also Buddhism inherently trains you with skills that help you navigate through uncertainty. So a lot of structures that patriarchy creates, it sort of promises, it tends to promise certainty and like sort of like a like something solid, right? And that is because men inherently like might fear ambiguity. Like there's certainty is a promise of patriarchy. So feminism says that it need not be that way. So then how, of course, a lot of women, like for example, marriage as an institution, the promise of marriage being the certainty of it, right? Um, the and for that certainty, like that's the biggest selling point of marriage. But if you knew how to navigate a relationship or like a life that is ambiguous, you wouldn't be so dependent on marriage, or you wouldn't be so dependent on institutions that are very rigid and like violent. So, and also the sense of certainty itself is not natural, so it's imposed with violence, and that's also something that it's becomes a part of like patriarchy basically. And like all these definitions, geographic boundaries, all of it comes under that, like large worldview where you want certainty, you want definitive boundaries, because it's difficult, you don't know how to navigate life without those definitions and boundaries. So, I mean, it's not a bad thing to have those boundaries, those rigid definitions. It's just that when people cling too hard to them, there is always violence that will be involved when it's challenged, which will naturally will be, because those things aren't, they're arbitrary, right? They're not like natural. So then you have there's also a moral framework beyond good and evil that Buddhism offers you, and that's also like that. It also helps people to like go beyond a binary. Like for example, you can look at it, it's beyond good and evil. That's what like or most religions sort of tend to like sort of focus on, like good and bad. But Buddhism is all about suffering and happiness, or like liberation and being stuck. Uh, or like being like contracted and like in pain, or like relaxed and expansive. So these are different ways of looking at the same thing, that if you do certain things like hurt others, you're harming yourself, in the sense that you're becoming a little bit of a stone yourself. That's a concept, like because you're contracting. When you're othering other people, you're contracting, you will eventually suffer from it, rather than calling it a bad thing. So that's a new perspective that can be used to sort of like mobilize more people, and so also sort of challenge patriarchy, that kind of uses good and evil in ways that are not always beneficial. Then we have like then like the last thing that I want to share with you all is like understanding gender through karma, the Buddhist concept of karma. I think all entrenched hegemonies, be it caste, racism, patriarchy, it's all produced and reproduced through karma. It's all conditioned by karma. Like how that's the first thing, like when there's no direct violence or force used on people, uh, it's conditioning you with the work that you do, the kind of work that you're forced to do in a given social structure. right? So that's now like caste is the biggest example of that. That when you're like pushed to do a certain kind of work, that will eventually condition you to have a certain kind of mind. So that's how that, and then they can use that. If you stop doing that kind of work, your mind can change, but they don't tell you that. So they also sort of eventually it sort of becomes a reinforcing thing, like the work itself, the mind itself reinforces the kind of work you'll ultimately be fit to do, right? And this happens even with gender, where you're like you're consistently conditioned to do the caregiving work, or like and where the other gender is like demotivated or discouraged from doing that kind of work. So then that binary remains, that if you keep thinking that this is your job, like you take care of the kitchen, I'll take care of the work, or bringing the bread to the table. So that itself sort of becomes like a binary, and we can never escape gender if that remains. So the work start, be it like mental, like stuff, because the karma is basically volitional. It's at the mental level first. So how you think, it's also a part of action in Buddhism, right? So if we are conditioned to think like women, in the sense that how we are conditioned to think about life in terms of, for example, I've noticed how in a lot of movement spaces, everything is always initiated by men, right? Like at least the bigger projects. Women don't even aspire or imagine they can like head something like that. It's very rare when they do. But mostly we don't even think about like initiating projects like that. Whereas men do, and they always get the fruits of those efforts as well. So why aren't we getting the same fruits? Because we are not doing that kind of work. We don't know that we can, and we don't push the boundaries. We don't think we can push the boundaries at all. That's where like the mental aspect of karma like sort of keeps us where we are, and we are unable to overcome it, because collectively I mean, when they do, it's either one woman or like just a few of them doing something small, but they cannot like, or we are unable to organize at the scale that men are able to organize, right? And that's something like I feel it contributes to gender binaries or gender boxes, where certain people, because they are unable to do certain kinds of activity, they are unable to get the privileges or the fruits that come as a result of such activity. So that's again there. So when you understand things like that, then it's easier to push for ourselves to like participate in those activities that have certain results, right? Certain the results that make men or upper caste, or like sorry, oppressor caste folk more powerful or privileged. So yes, and then there is also like yeah. So yes, that's why Buddha's Dhamma was not just a source of spiritual revolution, but it's also like a source of political revolution. Because when you start to see these things at like a cellular or a karmic level, you know what to do. You don't need to listen to anyone else to know what the path to emancipation or what path to empowerment is. So yeah. So then yeah, then there is, so I think these entrance systems are also not a given fixed reality, but they're processes that are like taking place, right? So when I think about the term Dalit woman, it's a set of experiences, perceptions, and patterns of reactions that are conditioned by a certain particular casteist reality. And this identity is forced upon us by circumstances that are controlled by ignorant or casteist people. So when that's the reality, why I mean, it is a reality. So what happens when we start clinging to this identity? That's the danger. I mean, it's there, but we also, I think Buddhism can also help you to slowly sort of understand this identity as like a product of certain forces. And once you understand these forces, you can also, you know that as human being, anyone can change these forces. We're not completely helpless. So even if we can start small, in smallest ways, and that is like, I think, like, just sticking to the values of like metta, compassion, mudita or appreciative joy and equanimity. Just small things like that within ourselves can sort of like have like a ripple effect on more external aspects of these realities, right? So once you start feeling metta for everyone, that element of competitiveness sort of becomes less frictious, and we sort of, that sense of equality and fraternity sort of naturally expands. So things like that is how we can like disrupt the process where the Brahminical patriarchy keeps unfolding, and that's the way we can transform our life as well. So I think I'll stop here and like open up the floor for discussion and thoughts that others might have on this. Thank you. Jai Bhim. Namo Buddhaya.
Thank you so much, Mridula. That was a great presentation. You connected Buddha's dharma with practice and also political movements, and how like dhamma stands apart from all these contemporary political movements, and also like how they neglect the aspect of daily life or existential questions, and how like Buddha's dhamma can help us in that. Uh, s- so thank you so much for that. And if anybody has questions, please either type in the chat box or just like unmute yourself and ask.
I think we'll give some time here. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. Meantime, I'll ask the first question. Like one thing, Rudala, you did speak about, but I would like to like hear more about it. Is like there is Dhamma, there is doctrine, there are all these ancient texts. But like the problem that we usually face is how to transfer that knowledge into actual practice, and how to actually change people's behavior. How we can transform practices. That's the challenge that movements also face, and even like in spiritual battle we face that problem. So how can we like, I mean, I know that that's a very big question, but like how can we do that?
That's actually a very good question, Tejas. So I've been like, so a lot of Ambedkarites I know are not a big fan of Vipassana, the practice. They're either like very, sorry, just a second. They're either very like suspicious of it, or like, they're generally uncomfortable with it. I remember one Buddhist person, they were telling me how Vipassana softens you too much, and becoming that soft is dangerous for us when we are like fighting caste and we're like constantly victimized by it, right? Which I understand, but what he doesn't really realize is the benefit of that softness. In the sense, that's how we can mold our life and change. We can't battle, like we can't break things, we can't solidify and like break things all the time, right? We need to sometimes be like water, so that like slowly and subtly changes things as well. And that's our human right, in my opinion, like to be that way and be safe as well. So that's what we need to sort of be aiming for. And also we don't need to completely, so the meditative aspect of Vipassana or like the Buddhism, it's like, so there's Pariyati and Patipati. Pariyati being the theoretical aspect, Patipati being the practice or meditational aspect, right? So without meditation, when you're only like claiming to be Buddhist or like intellectualizing it, it's like learning to swim through books and discourses and not really swimming at all. So the meditation would be like swimming. So unless you swim, you can't really change or move forward. So that is one thing I feel the community really needs to start paying attention to. But I also understand the the suspicions and the hesitation about embracing this, but like we've come this far to understand like Buddha's Dhamma through Dr. Ambedkar, but it will just be one step more if we can learn to like because the meditation aspect is what enables us to become clear from within and see what's going on with ourselves. And once we see what's going on with ourselves, how we're reacting to certain situations, immediately we'll be able to sort of course correct and transform and change that. And once we know that, like within like individuals, like it also becomes easy to sort of do that in like a community, like slowly. So, but that change will start at the individual level only. And then it's sort of like it will and how to do it, of course it'll be hard work, but all of us have to put our minds and efforts towards it. Otherwise it's like really not going to work. And yeah, that's my answer to that. Like as a community, we shouldn't neglect taking this stuff very seriously.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrudula, for joining the call today. And it was a very good talk. I do have one question on the Christianity. There is a lot of nuns. There is a nunnery, and those nuns basically what they do. I mean, they go to the very ground level. I mean, in India also, and they try to teach the spirituality in the ground level. But in the Buddhism, are the nuns are doing the same thing? Are they going to the ground level and those much to the that level or the nuns does? What is your thoughts on this one?
Sorry, Mahesh, I think it was a little unclear. If you could like more like shorten the question and ask like a little more like once again. I'm sorry, I
Yeah,
couldn't
I
hear
think
you.
you mentioned in your talk, basically, I think there are the Christian nuns and the spirituality. So our Buddhist nuns and the spirituality, how their impact on our society, basically.
Yeah. So from my experience, no, what I've seen is I think there are some phenomenal Buddhist nuns. Bante Suniti from Nagpur, for example, she helps, she supports Buddhist fraternity movements like, Dhamma talks and like other activities. She's a very erudite nun. And but the thing is, she's not given the same place and regards in the community as like a male or a bhikkhu. Like as bhikkhunis, she's phenomenal and her perspective on things are very different. But I feel like that is not given much attention to as a bhikkhu is given, like any regular bhikkhu. So that to me, for example, in the smallest procedures, like how, so that is something that has to be sorted within the monastic order itself, why this is happening. And we can also do that by supporting more bhikkhunis, I feel, bhikkhunis that are like, who have the potential to change things. We should support them, I think, because again, even our attention, resources, all of it goes to only the bhikkhu sanghas. So that way, like a religious reform of the Bhikshuni Sangha will also depend on the quality of upasaks and our political awareness. Because all of this ultimately has political outcomes as well.
Thank you. Thank you. And that's all. Members, any other questions? Yeah, please do unmute yourself. So, like, just the observation, I think in the Karnataka nowadays, the Buddhism is exploring in the very significant way than the other state. And it is declining to the other states like Bihar, UP, and other places, but it is going above the level in South India. So, what is your observation in that area right now?
Again, I couldn't hear you, Mahesh.
Okay,
Sorry.
okay. What I'm saying that the Buddhism is declining in the northern part of the India, but
Okay.
exploring
Yes.
in the southern part of the India nowadays,
Yes.
especially in the Karnataka, in the each villages and also cities is growing like crazy there,
Yes.
and a lot of monks also in that area. So, what is your thought? I mean, is that the spirituality is growing in the southern part and the northern part?
Yeah. Okay, so there's again that is also in a way political, because our here there are some very good leaders, like in Karnataka, for example, some 5 Buddhist ministers are there in the government right now. They might not be very explicit converts, but there are some 5, like there is the Kharge family, and there is so they are actively promoting it culturally. There is also the what is that? They're all like there's Sanjay Jharkholi, another minister. So these people are actively supporting these small ways the development of Buddhism. Like even the chief minister, he's also not overtly Buddhist, but like again there are values that he keeps propounding. So there is like a impetus here in Karnataka for sure. Then there is also the fact that in North India, it's the cultural domination of like Brahmanical forces is growing, and again it is robbing. Like there also, like there is this void, right? See, ultimately Buddhism will thrive only if practice is done, right? Once you start doing work, doing your thing, doing your ethical framework changes according to Buddhism, the results will naturally show. But in when it isn't practiced, or if it's only politicized, I think then it will not sort of like work, and it will shrink and it will die, Dhamma. And it's like, and Dhamma to me, at least when I'm concerned, it is like a holy grail. It is like something which is invisible, but it makes a place very beautiful and very harmonious. And when it's not respected, it will leave, or it will disappear. So, and how do you keep it there? By cultivating these values of Dhamma like regularly. So that when that is not done, there is a decline in places like Tamil Nadu, Karnataka. It is being done right now. All right, it is in whatever small ways that there is encouragement for it to be done. So there is already a cultural, and of course, even in Maharashtra to some extent, because these spaces are like different, right? But when you in North India, perhaps that is not happening, and that's why, for example, I'd gone to Bodh Gaya, and it was like visiting, like lamp, and underneath the lamp there is shadow, because it's just very bad situation there, except for the few hubs where there are international monasteries. Except for those spaces, the entire place is like it has no dhamma. There's no practice. There's just idols and temples and like no practice of dhamma. And that's the reason probably, and that shows, I think, that is what I feel, at least to some. I don't know if I'm right or wrong.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Does anybody have any other questions?
So looks like there is no more questions, Tejas. So I think we can wrap it up here. But again, it's the last chance one more time. Is there any questions to Mrudula, please? Raise your hand. It was a very good topic. And Mrudula, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and also spreading Dhamma in your capacity there.
Thank you for inviting. Looking forward. The kids were great. I was like very
Good.
surprised with the wisdom that they were exhibiting. So yeah, thank
So
you so much.
just to let you know, we are running this online Vihara since 2011 and without any stop. I mean, every Sunday, whatever it happened, but we are running it consistently. And we would like your help also to spread this awareness in your area. If there are any kids planning to join, they can join it from anywhere. This is an online platform and it's a good timing also. It's morning for us, evening for you guys back in India. So if you are going to any Vihara or any places, please put your words to them. They can join and you can share the link in your future.
Sure, sure. Thank you.
But with that note, any questions? Anybody? No? So again, thank you everyone for joining today. It was a very great session today. I would like to thank you on behalf of all the participants to Bante Shivali for joining from the Thailand and the Kid Story session host Kranti Chavan for hosting the kids session with Lumbini Tool. And also thank you Mrudula for joining from Bangalore. And with that, Tejas also. Tejas, thank you for introducing Mrudula to our forum. And it's time to connect each other and try to, spread the dhammas across the world. And all the participants joining today, this is also a very effort for you joining, spend your time activity. Know that there is a timing change. We are 1 hour behind. So make sure next week, please join on time, 10 o'clock. Sometimes might be 9 o'clock your places, based on the time zone. So please watch your clock and do join on time. With that note, thank you everyone for joining today. Have a great day ahead, everyone. Thank you.